The Philadelphia Eagles, one of the weirder franchises in the NFL, having probably the worst fan base in the entire league, being the previous defending Super Bowl champions. Unfortunately, their title defense did not go as planned as they bowed out in the wild card, whether it was thanks to players underperforming, tensions between players and coaches. This season was definitely a step back compared to their 2024 campaign. Welcome back to No Huddle, and welcome to the story of the 2025 Philadelphia Eagles. So as we know, Philly were the previous Super Bowl champions before this current Seattle team by absolutely destroying the Kansas City Chiefs on both sides of the ball. They set the record for the most points ever in a single postseason, and they had a great core of talented players with Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. That defense led by Vic Fangio, which was so young and so hungry and full of talent. There was really no reason as to why they couldn't repeat as Super Bowl champions and maybe even be the next dynasty. Well, free agency hit in 2025, and they lost a lot of core guys. Brandon Graham, Darius Slay, Josh Sweat, Milton Williams, all left on the defensive side. And for the offensive side, their offensive coordinator stayed in New Orleans to become the coach of the New Orleans Saints. Their new offensive coordinator for Philly would be a man called Kevin Patullo, who didn't really have much experience outside of being a good friend of their coach, Nick Sirianni. Going into the year, the Philadelphia Eagles were one of the favorites to repeat as Super Bowl champions, pretty much the clear favorite in the NFC, and for good reason too, considering the playoff campaign that they had just gone through, in which they dominated a lot of their opponents. So how did this campaign go? Let's find out. Their season opened in very weird fashion against the Dallas Cowboys, in which Jalen Carter got ejected before a play even happened. Despite that happening, the offense of the Eagles was pretty much clicking in the first half, with them scoring a bunch of touchdowns. However, their defense, thanks to penalties and overall chunk plays, the Cowboys were keeping up with them. Luckily, Jalen Hurts was having a really good game as he was keeping the Eagles ahead of the Cowboys the entire time, and a crucial fumble and rain delay in the third quarter ended up pushing Philly, as well as some drops by CeeDee Lamb, to a 24-20 victory in the first week and first game of their title defense. The only noteworthy thing about this game is that their star receiver, A.J. Brown, only caught one pass for 8 yards, which surely isn't going to be a problem with how good A.J. Brown is, right? Well, their offensive struggles continued to week 2 against the Kansas City Chiefs. However, their defense was doing a really good job on the Patrick Mahomes-led offense, but no one was really able to get a breakthrough until the fourth quarter, when Travis Kelce dropped the pass, which led to an interception. That and a big bomb to Devontae Smith ended up putting Philly up by 10. Kansas City couldn't recover, and Philly stretched to 2-0 after beating the Chiefs by a total of 3 points. However, their game against the Rams would prove to be their biggest test yet. The Rams jumped out to a 19-point lead because their offense was actually clicking, with Devontae Adams and Puka Nacua torching that Philly secondary. However, Philly was finally fighting back, with their offense finally clicking for the first time in the second half, and they rallied back to take a 1-point lead with a couple minutes left in the fourth quarter. Matthew Stafford, the eventual MVP, would drive them down the field, but then with a chance to win the game, the field goal got blocked. Jordan Davis returned it for a touchdown, and the Eagles won on an absolute thriller. Similar things happened in their Week 4 game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but this time it was the inverse, in which Philly, they jumped out to a large lead, but Tampa Bay tried to crawl back and tried to make a comeback, but in the end, Philly ended up holding on as opposed to the Rams, and the Eagles were now a whopping 4-0. Just a noteworthy thing about the Tampa Bay game, Jalen Hurts did not complete a single pass in the second half, but that's just a really niche stat. Of course, it will never happen again this season, obviously. Despite the good start, the Eagles were finally halted at the hands of the red-hot Denver Broncos. Once again, the Broncos' offense really wasn't doing much outside of the fourth quarter, but it was once again the offensive ineptitude that couldn't carry Philly over. It felt like they were just forcing the ball way too much, and after a fourth quarter rally by Bo Nix and company, Philly couldn't come back, and Philly would fall for the first time for the whole year. These troubles loomed over once again against their division rival, the New York Giants. This time, their offense was once again being very underwhelming, with the connection of the receivers and the quarterback not being there. But this time, their defense was also faltering, as Jackson Dart and Cam Skattebo had absolute career days. And Philly fell for the second time in a row, pushing them to a very underwhelming 4-2. Troubles were looming with A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts, as it was very clear that their chemistry was just not there, and it was carrying over to the rest of the offense, which was letting down the defense a lot of times this season. But a stimulus package would step up in the name of Brian Flores, of all people. Yes, the Brian Flores-led defense is the one unit that Philly was able to get their game off. Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith did numbers on that team. The defense stepped up and was able to torch their former quarterback Carson Wentz. Like I mentioned earlier, A.J. Brown had 3 touchdowns. Jalen Hurts had a perfect passer rating, and Philly was able to bounce back thanks to their offense finally having a complete fourth quarter game. And alas, the revenge against the Giants was able to kick in, and they were able to have back-to-back good offensive performances. This time, the reigning Offensive Player of the Year, Saquon Barkley, was finally able to step up and have a great game. They trounced the Giants on every single facet of the game, whether it was passing, running. Their defense stepped up, and it looked like the Philadelphia Eagles, going into the bye week, finally stepped up and were probably going to go back to the playoffs, maybe even to the Super Bowl, finally finding the form that made them champions the year before. During the bye week, they were able to acquire Jalen Phillips near the trade deadline, and he would step up in their next game against the Green Bay Packers, which would be a very nitty-gritty game. No team scored in the first half until Philly finally got a breakthrough with a field goal, and their defense was basically able to step up the entire time as Philly finally got their breakthrough in the fourth quarter thanks to a large reception by Devontae Smith, and they ended up holding on to win 10-7. So I guess those 2 games against the Giants and Vikings really didn't do much for their offensive struggles. The exact same script would follow against another NFC North team in the Detroit Lions. The defense had an absolutely spectacular performance, making Goff look terrible. They stopped him on 4th down countless times. Cooper DeJean had an interception, and in the end, a controversial call in favor of Philadelphia ended up favoring them, and they won by a score of 16-9. Once again, the offense was not doing their part. They had good performances in the last 2 weeks before their bye week, but now in these last 2 performances, it's been very iffy. Specifically, the passing game has just hasn't been there. Up next was a game against the Dallas Cowboys, who have one of the worst defenses in the league. So, of course, their offense would finally click. Philly, they jumped out to a 21-0 lead with Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown connecting on absolute dots, and it felt like Philly was just going to roll over Jerry World and win the NFC East. However, the Cowboys would fight back thanks to George Pickens and company. Dak Prescott would run for a touchdown. He would throw a couple more. The offense went stagnant with Saquon Barkley not being able to do anything. And in the end, it was Dallas that was able to rally back in the fourth quarter, and Aubrey kicked off a walk-off winner for the Cowboys to win 24-21. That's right. Philly went scoreless in the entire second half. These troubles would loom over against the red-hot Chicago Bears on Black Friday. It felt like the Eagles' offense was still not clicking all that much, and now their defense was suffering as well, with DeAndre Swift and Kyle Monangai having absolutely career-level games in which they completely gashed that defense, were able to control the time of possession a lot, and overall, the Bears' defense also did a good job as Philly fell for the second straight time with a score of 24-15. And while the defense did get gashed a lot, it was more so once again that the offense wasn't able to do anything outside of some deep shots from Jalen Hurts to A.J. Brown. And now to Monday night against the Los Angeles Chargers. And say it with me once again, the Philly offense did absolutely nothing. Jalen Hurts had probably the worst game of his entire career. And despite all that pressure that the Eagles were able to create on Justin Herbert, his life was hell the entire time. Philly fell for the 3rd straight game in overtime thanks to Jalen Hurts having once again one of the worst games of his career, throwing a total of 4 interceptions and having 5 turnovers. It was just an absolutely embarrassing display. They should have won this game, and they were lucky that their opponents in the division really weren't all that good. Otherwise, this division race could be a lot closer. Luckily, another stimulus package came in the favor of Philadelphia, some Michael Secret stuff, if you will, and that is the name of the worst team in the entire NFL, the Las Vegas Raiders. If there's anything that will make a terrible offense look good, it is probably the worst team and defense in the league. The defense stepped up. They posted a shutout. A.J. Brown looked incredible. Saquon Barkley ran well. And overall, Philly, while it wasn't a very convincing win because it was the Raiders, they snapped their 3-game losing skid. Up next was a trip to their division rivals in Washington, and once again, Philly actually stepped up and looked pretty good. Outside of Jake Elliott missing some field goals, Saquon Barkley had an incredible day. They won, and thanks to that, they clinched the NFC East for the second straight year, marking the end of the drought of consecutive division winners for that division since 2004. And overall, Philly, they were officially in the playoffs. And now that they were in the playoffs, I think people were still taking them a little bit seriously because we know if they catch them on a good day, Philly can beat any team in the league. In Week 17, they played against the Buffalo Bills, in which they almost had an emphatic comeback if it weren't for Josh Allen and company kind of choking the game away. And then another niche stat here, Jalen Hurts went the entire second half without completing a single pass. That's right. This and the Buccaneers game, that's 2 games in which Jalen Hurts did not complete a single pass, and they somehow still won the game for the narratives. It just wasn't a very good look for Jalen Hurts, I'm not going to lie. But that's besides the point because they won the game anyway, so I guess that doesn't really matter. Going into the final game of the regular season, Philadelphia Eagles were playing against the Washington Commanders, in which it was very inconsequential for both teams. However, had Philly won and the Bears lost, Philly would have claimed the number 2 seed in the entire NFC. Chicago did end up losing to Detroit. However, the Eagles opted to just rest starters, and Tanner McKee obviously wasn't really going to do much, and the Commanders ended up winning the game. This led to Philly, instead of them being able to play the very injured and very sluggish Green Bay Packers, they now had to play the kind of red-hot San Francisco 49ers, a team that they have a lot of history with, both in the playoffs and in the regular season. They do not like each other one bit, so let's see what happens. Is Philly going to regret this? Let's see. The game started out really well for the 49ers as they struck first on a touchdown thanks to a great play from Demarcus Robinson. But then Philly claimed the lead thanks to back-to-back Dallas Goedert touchdowns. Jake Elliott was doing a pretty good job at kicking, but he did miss an extra point, which means that Philly was only up by 6. Nothing really happened in the next 2 quarters, but we were fed to a really wild fourth quarter. Christian McCaffrey caught a pass from Juwan Jennings, of all people, on a trickery. Philly ended up putting them... Jake Elliott put Philadelphia up once again 19-17, but then Christian McCaffrey would score his second touchdown of the day to put Philly up 23-19. This left Philly with one final chance to save their season with very few time remaining. And the one guy who had been moaning the entire season about not getting the ball ended up dropping the ball on a very crucial play on 3rd down, and on the final play of the Philadelphia Eagles season, Jalen Hurts threw it into triple coverage on 4th and 11 because literally no one could get open, and Philly would bow out in the first round of the wild card round against their very hated sort of rival San Francisco 49ers, thus ending a very, very weak title defense compared to a lot of the other guys we've seen across NFL history. So how exactly did we get here? Because it's not very common that we go from one team being an absolute juggernaut, being the best in the world, to being whatever the hell this mess of a team was. First of all, Vic Fangio, you're good in my book. You know who wasn't good? The entire Philly offense. The defense did their part, but that offense was just... it was cataclysmic. Kevin Patullo proved that he was just not a good play caller. The offensive line went from being an absolute juggernaut unit to just being very average and not being good. Saquon Barkley went from being an MVP level player to a shell of himself, a guy that couldn't even out-yard Javonte Williams. The receivers clearly did not have a good chemistry with the quarterback, whether that's Jalen or their fault. Devontae Smith was kind of good, but A.J. Brown specifically had troubles throughout the entire year, including getting into it with Nick Sirianni during their loss to the 49ers. And of course, Jalen Hurts, he does deserve some blame because he is the quarterback, and overall, like, some of the offensive responsibility does fall on you. all those units combined, and you get a group that it just doesn't really do anything. And of course, this is where the meme came in of Saquon up the middle, AJ down deep ball and punt. Like, if you get a meme with your offense being that bad, you know that you have some problems. We obviously know that Philly can bounce back from bad situations and win again. I'm not counting them out next year. We saw in 2023 that they were just absolutely abysmal on defense, and then they came back to have this absolutely game-breaking unit, and we know how good Philly's defense is now. So I think they can recover, but I think it does call for some change. They obviously got rid of Patullo already. Will they get rid of Nick Sirianni? Will they have to trade A.J. Brown? I don't know. It's just some questions that Philly will have to answer in this offseason. I believe that the sun can shine on them again, and they can return to their winning ways and maybe claim their third Lombardi. But for now, in 2025, it's going to leave a sour taste in their mouths, as we know that the 2025 Philadelphia Eagles, they may be the biggest failure in the entire NFC. And that, my friends, is the story of the 2025 Eagles. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe and please like, as any support is truly appreciated. Once again, subscribe so you can keep up with any posts throughout this offseason as we wait for the new year in September. And I'll see you guys in the next one.